What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, a friend Tinoco again. I'm coming at you from my living room here in North Memphis. And I'm here again, once more, to tell you what you need to know, not necessarily what you want to hear. And I'm continuing this series of Hispanic Heritage Month with always with a little 901 twist. Because, well, why not? Because I live here, right? But anyway, we were driving by and walking by the Mississippi River yesterday to commemorate the independence of six countries. Six countries which were Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. Why those six? Why those six? Those six because they formed only part of what was then the Viceroyalty of New Spain. There wasn't Mexico in the scale of which we know it now, or even of the Mexican Empire, which we will look at. What was across the river from what we were looking at over yesterday wasn't the Louisiana territories of France in the time of the American independence. It was the Louisiana territory of the Viceroyalty of New Spain. New Spain was a very, very large dominion, comparable in size to the present-day United States, that existed in the decades up to Mexican independence, basically. Arguably up until 1898, maybe with Cuba and Puerto Rico and the Philippines. But anyhow, so you might have heard like this, there's this rapper called Viceroy. Viceroy means the direct agent, empowered agent of the king. Like Vice King, Viceroy, right? Okay. So anyway, so what was across the river from where it is now Memphis was in fact, it wasn't Spain per se. It was, it shows up as Spain or Spanish territory if you look in a correct textbook, which many of us do not. It was the Viceroyalty of New Spain. It was a large area lorded over by the Viceroy of New Spain. This person was seated in Mexico City then, and which even today, the largest city in North America. So, I would argue that not only Mexico, how would I put it? Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica won their independence on they declared their independence on September 16th, 1810. That area also affected what is presently California, was freed from a European master in 1810. That's when California started fighting to be liberated from Spain. That's when most of Texas, southwestern Louisiana, a little bit of Oklahoma, all of New Mexico, all of Nevada, all of Utah, a little bit of Oregon, a little bit of Wyoming, large parts of Colorado, and a little bit of Kansas. But, wait. Arkansas. Most of Louisiana. Yeah, I forgot the Louisiana Territory in there too. All right. I'll give you a visual aid. So, I have a still picture on my screen. And we shall see. Let's see. Let me get it pointed to the right angle. Okay. So this is a depiction of, I would say, around 1796, 1800. Why? Because Tennessee is now recognized as a state in 1796. So this is the Spanish territory of Texas, which is reduced in size because Tamaulipas extends north into Nueva Extremadura back then, the Nueces River, as does Coahuila. All right. So Texas extends into southwest Louisiana. Like if you lived in Lake Charles or Lafayette, you would have been in Spanish Texas. So this was Louisiana. So parts of Minnesota and all these other states in the Midwest, including all of Missouri, all of Iowa, all that was lorded over by the viceroy in Mexico City. This was the Kingdom of Mexico, a reduced area because they had other little kingdoms that had other folks in there. California was all of this and this at one time, old and new, or Alta y Baja California. So this area also to here, whereas Costa Rica is at, was part of the same dominion as was Florida. If you extend at the 31st parallel, the border between Mississippi and Louisiana out to Georgia, that was part of Florida, east-west Florida, as was Cuba and Santo Domingo. So I asked, they considered Belize part of, this is kind of funny. So the captaincy of Guatemala and Kingdom of Yucatan thought that Belize was part of them. That's a little iffy. But for sure, Panama, even though it's in Central America, did not receive independence with all these other countries. Why? Because it was part of the Viceroyalty of New Granada, whose capital was in Bogota. So later, Panama got its independence from Colombia when it broke away from the rest of the other countries, despite the best efforts of Simon Bolivar, who we'll talk about later. Basically the bridge yesterday did not light up the colors of Panama because it did not get its independence on the same day as these 6 countries did. But yes, if you lived in Louisiana, you lived in Florida, the Gulf Coast of Mississippi and Alabama, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, most of metropolitan Minnesota, Kansas, Colorado, most of Montana, including a little bit of Canada, you got your independence from Spain, but this reverted back to France when Napoleon invaded Spain in a little after 1800. But all these dudes stayed in Spain. So you live in California, you got your independence from Europe in 1810. Not in 1776, but in 1810. If you live in Arizona, you got your independence in 1810. You live in New Mexico, you got your independence in 1810. So you should have been out there doing the cry of independence with the rest of us yesterday or 2 nights ago. So anyway, this people in the captaincy, or the kingdom, it says, of Guatemala, which is most of Central America, inclusive Chiapas, which stayed with Mexico when these guys broke off into the United States of Central America, um, uh, basically were separate countries that recognized their independence also, other than Mexico. So, yeah, I told you Spain was the most dominant power, colonial power um, in North America, not the United States, not Great Britain. So anyway, but those places must not have had a lot of people. Let me tell you, okay? Let's go back to the map. Pensacola was as large as Philadelphia under Spain. Okay? This was a large, thriving Gulf. Why wouldn't it be? It had a huge ass harbor in it, all right? Right across from Veracruz. Havana used to be like the capital of this whole dominion, but it moved into Mexico. Arguably, the Philippines were as well. Because why was Mexico such a big deal? Because these big galleons came over from the Philippines, landed in Acapulco, brought their stuff over land to Veracruz through Mexico City. The ships picked up in Mexico City and went all the way to the Atlantic-facing port of Cadiz in Spain, and vice versa. It went back the other way. So Mexico City was one of the most largest, prosperous cities. Like the richest, most powerful people in the empire were not in Toledo or Madrid. They were here in Mexico City. Go figure. It was probably the only imperial power where that was the case. London was the most powerful place in the British Empire. Paris was the most powerful place in the French Empire, of course. Lisbon, of course, for Portuguese Empire. But nope, Mexico City was where what per capita, I guess, or that's where most of the wheeler dealers and rich bourgeoisie existed in the Spanish Empire. So yes, when we look across the river, you're looking at a dominion at the time of U.S. independence that stretched from the southern edge of Costa Rica all the way to the Canadian border in some parts, and over to the west coast to what is roughly the California-Oregon border. Pretty impressive. Santa Fe, New Mexico was obviously a well-populated area. There were kids born in descent to Spanish settlers, not conquistadors, but actually settlers making civilian life in Santa Fe around the time the Jamestown colony was established. We know about St. Augustine here as the oldest city on the U.S. mainland. Well, that wasn't because the British landed there in 1530. That was because of our friends, the Spanish, right? And we know about the cities of San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Francisco were a big deal back in the day, having nothing to do with whatever happened east of the Mississippi. It was because of all that good action and their separate little culture developing far from the metropolis. Like, think Zorro and all those guys, right? That's California. That's Spanish California, or Mexico rebelling for independence from Spanish California. So yeah. So the Viceroyalty of New Spain was that very large area, and more than half of the lower 48 states was in fact lorded over by the Viceroy at Mexico City when the U.S. got its independence, and for a couple of decades afterwards. So, and how the with I don't, is there an exception to that rule? No. Without exception, the circumstances under which the U.S. acquired territories bit by bit on the Gulf Coast, and then Louisiana, which did not necessarily was not granted by Spain to France, and then the rest of the, Texas and the in the revolution there, and basically, the California and New Mexico territories afterwards those were um, those were gained by the United States. They were not legitimate claims. There were people there already living there that were not just indigenous people, but also Spanish settlers and their descendants, and their mixed, a lot of their mixed race descendants, which were classical, mestizo Mexicans. I haven't taken a 23andMe, so that would be probably something to see, to share with you guys, well, what the results of my 23andMe are. But as you can see, there is a large area. Spain became the biggest, and then Mexico, of course, the biggest rival of the United States for territory, and so there is so the ways by which the United States gained all that territory, you don't get the full picture because they were not legitimate claims, and they took diplomatic subterfuge or war to gain. So anyway, it wasn't like, people went to bed Mexican and woke up as U.S. residents or citizens and not full standing, and then, you know, that that wasn't necessarily a change for the better for everybody involved, if you know what I mean. But anyway, so my mother's, both of my grandmothers, actually, both of my grandmothers were from areas contested between Coahuila and Texas. I have people on both sides of this shifting border there. Okay. And so, and they've had good lives. And you ask me, where would they rather have been? I don't know. It's a matter of circumstance, right? Anyway, something to think about. We're not necessarily foreigners in this land by what hopefully you were able to conclude by what I saw. And I will see you later. That is my chapter on the Viceroyalty of New Spain. I'll have more for you tomorrow in the 4th episode of Hispanic Heritage Month 2020. Hasta luego.